I'm absolutely delighted to be able to introduce our keynote luncheon speaker, Ambassador Elin Suleymanov, whom I know who needs no introduction to so many in this room, but I am reminded by that famous quote by Dr. Henry Kissinger, a man who gives so many famous quotes, that he says, "It's true that I don't need an introduction, but I like a good introduction." So I'm going to give the ambassador a good introduction, although he needs no introduction in this room. In some ways, the ambassador embodies the diplomatic relationship between the United States and Azerbaijan for the past 20 years. Originally serving here in Washington as a press officer in the embassy in the very early days, then serving as senior counselor at the Foreign Relations Department and the Office of the President in Baku, and then had the wonderful distinction of being Azerbaijan's first consul general to Los Angeles. So you are the consul general to the stars. And then for all of his sins was sent here to Washington in October of 2011 to serve as the ambassador. Prior to the ambassador's return to Washington, prior to his diplomatic service, he served as, he worked in the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in Azerbaijan, also served in the Czech Republic in Prague and the Open Media Research Institute. Degrees from Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, graduate degrees from Moscow State University and the University of Toledo in Ohio. That's a fantastic location. We are so pleased to have the ambassador provide us with his thoughts, which is a nice summing up of a very rigorous and fulsome morning of discussion on U.S.-Azerbaijani relations, put his thoughts to it, and then I think after brief remarks, then we want you to join this conversation, and we want to start immediately into Q&A. So with that, which I hope it was a good introduction, Mr. Ambassador, thank you, and we look forward to your comments.
Thank you, Dr. Conde. That was very kind of you. In fact, very much an undeserved introduction, but thank you. And thank you for the organizers. Thank you, Mr. Buharsky. Thank you, Dr. Cohen, for putting this event together, and for all the speakers and participants. This is, of course, I think it's a good sign that so many of you are interested and present here today. I would like to point out that perhaps the organizers have made a mistake of bringing the most boring and uninteresting speaker as a keynote speaker, but that's why I'll try to be as brief as possible, especially given the fact that the discussions this morning have been quite exhaustive, and much of what we could possibly discuss has been discussed already. But I'll stop on a couple of points which are very important. I think when we look back at the 20 years of diplomatic relationship between the United States and the countries of the Caspian region, we need to look what has been achieved, what has been done, and where do we go from here. The situation today is dramatically different. What did we have 20 years ago? I remember Dr. Conley was kind enough to point out that I myself was very much a part of this diplomatic relationship. In fact, I was the first Musky Fellow from Azerbaijan in 1992. I was a major exchange program. I got my visa at a small room, which was then rented by the Embassy of the United States in a hotel room. They didn't then have ambassador. They had an acting chargé d'affaires, an outstanding diplomat who later became an ambassador. We still don't have Mr. Finn, yes. And 20 years later, US still doesn't have an ambassador in Azerbaijan. There are some constants. There are some constants. Well, if the reasons for then not having ambassador were objective, the US was just establishing its diplomatic presence, then today the reasons for having no ambassador are purely subjective and have to do with the ethnicity issues of the wife of ambassador, which I think is unacceptable in the 21st century, any country, but especially in America. But more importantly, what has been the path we've gone in 20 years? Whatever happened in our region, and some of the speakers have pointed that out, would have been impossible without the support and the presence of the United States of America. I think that's understood, that's easy to see, The United States has been a welcome presence. The United States has been a positive presence, and in many ways a presence which was changing for the good. Let me give you some examples. If you look back, and I'll repeat myself a little bit because I keep saying that in every presentation, so many of you who have heard me before would hear this again. If you look back at 20 years of the US policy in Eurasia, the ups and downs, the changes, what is the one single most tangible success of the US foreign policy? I would actually submit to you, and I know that may cause certain allergy to some people, but it is the energy project, which is Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline. That's the actual success on the ground. 5 years ago, if I ask you, you would say maybe a revolution there, maybe here, maybe something else, maybe disarmament, maybe something else. Those are very important successes. But if you look at something which lasts, which is on the ground and which keeps bringing benefits to everybody involved, that is what it is. And the reason for that is very simple. We often look at the US policy, especially in this city, as something which is short-term. 2 years in Congress, 4 years for administration, maybe 8 years. But the real life doesn't last according to political schedules. The issues in the world which are much longer, they need a sustained commitment. How do you do that, though? How do you have a sustained commitment? If one administration has one policy, the other administration has another policy, what do you do? I think the key to that, and that's illustrated by the success of the energy policy of the United States in the region, is a long-term commitment and the perception that that's a US policy. When President Clinton, Bill Clinton, was directly involved in promoting the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline, that support coming from the United States did not stop at the change of administration. The George W. Bush administration continued doing that. So throughout 2 administrations, that's 16 years, the United States has pursued a very clear policy in the region in support of diversification of pipelines, delivery of energy supplies. What was the result of that? The result of it was that people perceived it in the region not as Clinton policy or a Bush policy, but as an American policy. And that's what people need to know. People in our region, partners of the United States, need to know that there is a commitment from the United States which exceeds a particular political agenda of 1 or 2 administrations. That there is a strong US interest to move forward with particular directions of the policy. And that's what brings benefits. Now, of course, and I served in California, so there is a certain perception of oil and energy projects. But you have to look at it a little bit wider. What has energy projects done in Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey? First of all, they laid the backbone for regional integration. Now, in the former Soviet Union, the only 2 nations which come up with the example of successful cooperation and most importantly, voluntary cooperation. Nobody forces Azerbaijan and Georgia to come together and say, you know, you have to do this. We want to do that. Georgians and Azeris want to do that together. That's an example of voluntary, mutually beneficial cooperation, which is based on understanding of common benefits for people of Georgia and people of Azerbaijan. How is it being done? It's based on energy projects, in this case, Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline. Now, that may sound strange, but we shouldn't forget that the European Union was based on coal initially. I mean, there has to be some tangible basis for this cooperation. We could talk all we want about ephemeral issues, but the reality is that something needs to be grounded. And the anchor for this cooperation is energy. Now, Azerbaijan today has prospered, more or less. I could give you statistics, but since 2006, Azerbaijan GDP grew exactly 3 times. Azerbaijan, 3 times. This is a significant growth. if you look at Georgia today, indeed, Azerbaijan is the largest taxpayer in Georgia, Azerbaijan State Oil Company. And the development of energy in the Caspian has contributed enormously to development of neighboring Georgia. Today, as Mr. Saunders have pointed out, Azerbaijan is to become the major investor in Turkey. Now think about it. Turkey is a major economy. For a country of the size of Azerbaijan to become a largest investor in Turkey speaks about something. It says something about Azerbaijan's priorities. Turkey today develops, and by the way, the Turkish success of becoming an energy center for the region is based mainly on Caspian resources. That's where the idea of Turkey being a center for energy development comes from. And so far the most successful project has been BTC. I keep coming back to that because it illustrates a number of things. One is that you need an anchor for development. Second, the need for sustained US commitment and clear-eyed policy. Third, which is very important, it illustrates something else for Azerbaijan. Many people forget that now, but the vision which originated in Baku was not limited to Azerbaijan alone. We know and we understand that our region needs to be successful for us to be successful. Azerbaijan cannot, and most importantly, should not be the only successful country in the region. We're happy about Georgia's success. We're happy about Turkey's success. We want to see our region. We want to see that prosperity expand to Eastern Caspian. We want the region to prosper. Because very simply and very egotistically, that actually is good for us. Good region, you live in a good region, it's like you buy a house, you want to buy a house in a prosperous neighborhood, right? That's as simple as that. We own a house. That house is called Azerbaijan. We built that country. And as we keep building that country, we want it to be a part of a successful neighborhood. Now, it's not easy. We spoke about challenges. One of the key factors why we were able to do that. In 1994, when the Baku-Tbilisi, when the first investment of what was then called the deal of the century happened in Azerbaijan, it was at that time it was $8 billion of foreign investment coming from international energy companies. One of the and by the way, today that $8 billion translates as a much higher number. I think about 40 billion in today's dollars. Why would Western companies invest the largest single investment in the former Soviet Union, not in any other country which has more oil and gas? I mean, every Caspian country has more oil and gas. Russia, Iran, Kazakhstan, they have more oil. Turkmenistan has more gas. Why would they invest in the basically smallest producer in the region? For a very simple reason. Because the government of Azerbaijan, then led by Heydar Aliyev, made a decision that in order to secure the opening of the region, we have pioneered the practice when every commitment, every contract or PSA, production sharing agreement, signed with an energy company in Azerbaijan was guaranteed by the law. It became a part of the law of the land by an act of the parliament, Milli Mejlis. That added predictability and added an idea of sanctity of contract where it doesn't exist. Now think about that. No other country has done that again. In 1994, we signed an agreement, $8 billion. Azeri Çırak Güneşli offshore field. That's the main producer for BP. Think about that. What is it today? 2012. So it's almost 18 years. Almost 18 years that project works, brings money, pumps oil. Things have changed. No other agreement since then, and there were about 30, 35, maybe even more, have signed after that. None of them would be under the same conditions because things have changed. They would be much more favorable to Azerbaijan. Why doesn't Azerbaijan change, even speaks about changing a single letter in that agreement, not a comma? Because we live by our commitments. Because that's what Azerbaijan does. Once we have committed ourselves to an agreement, we uphold it, we observe it, and we live by that. And that's not only in this case. When we say we're the friends of the United States of America, what that means, that Azerbaijan within 2 hours on September 11 provides absolute unconditional support to the United States of America in fighting terrorism. That means that Azerbaijani troops were in Kosovo, the only Muslim troops in Iraq, on the side of a coalition, and they're in Afghanistan. And today, about 40% of cargo, non-lethal cargo, going to Afghanistan goes via Azerbaijan. That's what it means. That also means that when push comes to shove, Azerbaijan faces a serious challenge for its commitment for the United States. I think it's not surprising, it's not secret, that very recently Azerbaijan rounded up a number of extremist elements within Azerbaijan trying to attack both Israeli and American and other Western targets, embassies and all this, within Azerbaijan. And we do our share. Now the question is the partnership, it takes two to tango. I've seen, we've all seen Dancing with the Stars. When there's only one person dancing, it's pretty ugly. It doesn't look very good when there's only one dancer. And and to have a good dance, you need the music and sometimes an ambassador in the country. Dr. Gurbanova spoke here earlier. She mentioned that Azerbaijan is the only country in the world which borders both Russia and Iran. That speaks for itself. Azerbaijan is not the only nation in the Muslim world, of course, which is pro-Western, which is secular. We have seen the successes of our friends and brothers in Turkey and other nations. But Azerbaijan is in a very important neighborhood and stands today as a potential example of what could be where post-Soviet legacy, a Muslim identity, secularism, and pro-Western orientation can come together. That's actually a very positive example. But that has to be sustained. Now, what I'm talking about is a snapshot. The situation is very fluid. It develops very quickly. It's difficult to say how it will go. There is, of course, a shadow of what happens in the region. And that shadow is very sad. And we've seen the part of the discussion earlier. And the shadow comes from the very simple fact that we still have a conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. That's not the only conflict in the region. Of course, there are territorial conflicts within Georgia. There's a conflict in Moldova. Those are sad shadows which cast doubt over the future of the region. They don't have to. They're unnecessary. They come from two different visions. I'll touch a little bit on that. But before I do, I'll ask something else. I have, for years, participated in a conference with my good Georgian friends. Whenever my Georgian friends would speak about success of Georgia, and some of them are very impressive, I have to say, they would also mention that we have an issue, a challenge to territorial integrity of the Republic of Georgia. Yet, every time they would speak about that, our Western European and American friends say, just forget about it. Let's talk about reforms in customs. Let's talk about reforms in transportation, which are very important things, by the way. That's not to diminish their importance. What they have failed to understand is that unresolved status of that explosive situation has brought under doubt not only the reforms the Georgian people have done, but the very existence of the state of Georgia at some point. That is a reality. We cannot avoid considering the possible consequences of renewed hostilities between Azerbaijan and Armenia. We cannot ignore the threat that unresolved conflict poses. 20 years ago, many things happened. We established diplomatic relations with the United States. The worst tragedy of the war, the tragedy of Khojaly, took place also in February of 1992. Major losses of Azerbaijan territorial lives. I have served, as Dr. Conley pointed out, I served at UNHCR. I've seen firsthand what happens to refugees when they're being expelled from their houses. And we have a generation of people who have never seen their homes, about 1 million people. Now, Azerbaijan is unique not only in having a regional vision, but inside the country. Azerbaijan was among the very first countries. Do you know where the first money went from the state oil fund of Azerbaijan? To provide better housing to Azerbaijani displaced populations. Now think about it. We don't spend money on buying weapons then. We don't support terrorists. We do not support extremism. We try to accommodate our own people who have been expelled as a result of an aggression from a neighboring country. That's what I call responsible management. Oh, now, I have heard earlier today that our good friends from the Armenian embassy and Armenian representative are very interested in domestic affairs of Azerbaijan. That's good, because we all live in the same region. But what we should think about is not how to try a rhetoric against our neighbors, but how to build a region which will come together. Now, that has two visions. Either we live in an integrated region to which example of Turkey, Azerbaijan, and Georgia stand as imperfect as it is, but a viable example. Or we retreat to our ethnic, religious pigeonholes and build our future on this. I don't like you because of that religion. I don't like you because of that ethnicity. I don't like you that. I can't live with you because you pray to a different church. How far would it take us into diverse Caucasus? Azerbaijan is a diverse nation. Caucasus is a diverse land. Azerbaijan and the Caucasus as a whole could be an example for the future in many ways, or we could all fail. That's also possible. That is a question which is still open. Now, this is not a very positive conclusion in a way, but the picture of the region actually, despite all of the challenges we face, actually looks much brighter than I would imagine. If you go to Azerbaijan today, if you do, what would be your main complaints? Too much traffic? Actually, too much traffic. Too much construction, dust? Yeah, horrible, right? Do you know why? Because people buy flats. They buy apartments. That's why they build things. You know why there was so much traffic? Because everybody I graduated from school, high school with, who had 1 car per family, now has 3. And our roads are not very good at this, yes. Although we're trying to build infrastructure as much as we can. And by the way, a major investment in Azerbaijan today goes to infrastructure. Infrastructure and education. Azerbaijan today has sent out thousands of people to study abroad. It's a presidential program instituted by President Ilham Aliyev to send people to study abroad. Now, how successful they study abroad, how useful they come back, how good the teachers are, that's often a question not for me, but for people who choose these universities and for people who teach at these universities. There are limitations, but at least the direction is clear. That's where we're moving. In a way, Azerbaijan's goals are very ambitious. Dr. Gurbanova pointed out that very well that we actually invest in neighboring countries. Now Azerbaijan has made major investment in Romania. It goes into Switzerland. We just bought an Exxon gas station network in Switzerland called ESSO. That shows that Azerbaijan has ambition, but it's a positive ambition. It's not a destructive ambition. Now, I think in many ways, just as it had befitted the United States over the last 20 years to support the efforts of its regional allies to build a successful region, it is it will be very befitting for the next 20 years to be supportive of their outreach and to make sure that that region stays successful for the future, that it expands, that that cooperation strengthens and expands and becomes an example of what could be. I'm sure that Eastern Caspian nations are very important. They're a deserver of goodwill. They're fundamental for the success of US policy in the region. It's Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan. But the road to them and the key to them lies via the Caucasus. And that means Azerbaijan and Georgia. And that Azerbaijan's significance is bigger than that as well. So as we look at this, the final note, I will second the call by many speakers here, including Mr. Saunders, that it is clear today that the biggest discussion on energy security and diversification today is focused on gas, natural gas. And although it does benefit directly the European consumers, we have to understand that without a strong US leadership on this issue, very few things get done, especially now. So it would be good to have a clear-eyed policy from the United States on that issue and on the importance of providing guidance and leadership on the energy issues. For us, the goal is to diversify our markets, to diversify our buyers, consumers, and also, to the extent possible, to contribute to energy diversity and security of the European region. So I think I've gone more than I should have. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for those great comments. I like that strong vision of the importance of American sustained engagement, bipartisanship, have a vision, regional success. I think that those are always important aspects of U.S. policy. I think what we'll do now with the few minutes we have is I'll pose a question. I know Ariel wants to pose a question, and then we'll bundle a few, if we could keep questions very short and concise and comments to a minimum. And then, Mr. Ambassador, we'll have you respond to those and then give us some closing comments, and then we'll throw it back to Ariel and Janusz for some concluding remarks. My question stems from your comments regarding Nagorno-Karabakh. And in your view, is there something that needs to be changed and adjusted? The Minsk group has been there. Some have questioned whether it's the right formula. What are your thoughts looking towards the future of what international mediation can or cannot do to help find some solutions on Nagorno-Karabakh? That's my question. Ariel, why don't you pose yours now, and then we'll open up to some other questions.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you for your remarks. I'm proud of my alma mater, our alma mater, the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, for graduating such a distinguished man here. But the question is about your neighbor to the south. You mentioned that Iranian cells were discovered and arrested recently. But that is a symptom. That is not an underlying problem. What are the challenges? What is it that irritates the Iranian leadership today when they're looking at Azerbaijan? The border has been decided by the Treaty of Turkmenchay for a long time. There were some hints from the Iranian leadership that they may go as far as look again at the treaty. Is it just your relationship with the United States and the West? Is it the secular nature of your society? Is it the ethnic transborder issue because there are so many Azerbaijanis living in Iran whose linguistic rights and other rights are oppressed? How would you describe the current mindset in Tehran when they're looking at Baku and at Azerbaijan?
Okay, hold that thought. Are there any?
Thank you very much, Andrei Nikolaevich from Armenian Embassy, and thanks, Ambassador, for your thoughts. I would certainly share many of them, especially those regarding that one needs to tango, and one should not base its relations with neighbors based on ethnic and religious identity, but rather look farther in its relations for the sake of security, stability in the overall regional perspective. In this regard, I would like to mention that Armenia never did and will hope will not do look at our relations with our neighbors. We've even managed to strike a fair balance in our relations with our neighboring Iran, so that recently the State Department has issued a number of states which State Department would like their relations to limit with Iran. Armenia was not among those that list, and that constitutes that we again found a middle ground, a balanced solution with our relations with Iran, as well as look at our efforts throughout the last year to normalize our relations with neighboring Turkey. When it comes to Azerbaijan, of course, Ambassador, again, I would agree that we have to start to somehow engage each other in mutual relationship. There were a number of CSBMs, confidence and security building measures, proposed between our two countries, but also between Nagorno-Karabakh Republic and Republic of Azerbaijan. Several of them were recently reiterated in the joint statement of our presidents, be it the withdrawal of snipers from the line of contact or the mechanism for investigating the incidents on the line of contact, be it the relations, people-to-people relations. Let me mention that most of those CSBMs were rejected, unfortunately, by Azerbaijan, the last case being the mechanism of investigating the incidents of a line of contact when Azerbaijan blocked the OSCE budget, which provided some valuable finance to implement those mechanisms. Azerbaijan just vetoed the decision. So, Mr. Ambassador, can you please explain me this dilemma when you are talking about the possibility of mutual relations, and I certainly will agree with you that they should be implemented. On the other hand, the State Department country profile, if you open it and look at Azerbaijan's country profile, it says that none of Armenian citizens of United States, even none of the United States citizens with Armenian family names are encouraged to go to Azerbaijan because Azerbaijan will not just give a visa for them. So how do you think we can develop our relations without even accepting our two, even not the citizens, but Armenians from dissidents from abroad to come to Azerbaijan to develop some kind of relations? Please explain me this dilemma.
Thank you. Any other questions for the ambassador? Yes, sir. Microphone coming to you in just a second.
Aram Avetsyan, NKR office. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for the interesting presentation. And I can also agree that really the non-resolution of the conflicts in South Caucasus is really challenging, and it's really a problem for the development of the all countries. But unfortunately, the biggest problem continues to be that preparation the nation to the war and preparation nation to the peace, it's two dilemmas. And it seems that currently Azerbaijan pursued the policy of preparation its nation mostly to the war, which is very unfortunate because we have seen a lot of results. We have seen a lot of results violent because of the Karabakh violent conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh, and we have seen Maraga massacres, we have seen Zumgait pogroms, we have seen Bakhov pogroms, Kirovabad pogroms. So to avoid such kind of further problems, that will be better to prepare its nation to the peace mostly, and that was not only the wish, but it also the in the statement of the OSCE Minsk Group, since we have now 20th anniversary of the establishing of Minsk Group, which is calling the nations to prepare its people. And just a couple of days before that nation, we see the statement of the president of Azerbaijan, which is called world Armenians the first enemy for Azerbaijan. So we see a lot of problem in intolerance to have the dialogue and continue negotiations. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you. Mr. Ambassador, I'll let you respond to those questions, then provide any closing remarks.
Thank you. Well, I think some of the questions are somewhat related. You asked about the Minsk group. Indeed, this year marks actually that this month marks the 20th anniversary since the establishment of the Minsk group. I used that analogy before. If for 20 years someone has been dating you and nothing has ever happened, doesn't that speak for something? Over the 20 years of existence of the Minsk group, not a single person who's been displaced has been relieved of their displacement. No person came back to their homes. No territory has been liberated. Azerbaijan, it's not a question whether that format is better than another format, or it's a different issue. The question is that we need to have a clear understanding of what our objectives are. It should be a result-driven mediation. I remember, and Ms. Mehradeva remembers as well, together we went to Key West. And we were sitting at the Key West talks when a French co-chair and a Russian co-chair and an American co-chair having a laugh fest at the panel. They forgot about Armenians and Azerbaijan. They were talking about themselves all the time. How great we cooperate. How it's so amazing that we understand each other. And the poor Armenian guy came up to me and said, "So what do we get from this?" I said, "You get nothing. They just love each other." That's a great thing that they get along, and there's a dialogue. But we need a result on the ground. People need a result on the ground. So of course, Azerbaijan is committed to negotiations. It's obvious. I mean, no other country in the world would tolerate 20 years of its independence being invaded, occupied, and displaced population. I mean, that's by itself is a confidence-building measure of enormous proportions. I mean, don't forget, not a single inch of Armenian territory is occupied by Azerbaijan. Almost 20% of Azerbaijan territory is occupied by our neighbors, and we're talking about CBMs, confidence-building measures. Of course, it would be good to withdraw the snipers, of course. But the United Nations Security Council resolution since 1993 called for withdrawal of all occupying forces. I mean, so when did we come to the point when we began saying, look, you know what? You can fly that airplane, but you cannot fly that airplane. You could, we don't like this helicopter, but we don't like that helicopter. I mean, occupation is occupation. It's a war. We did not begin this war. We did not occupy anyone's land. The foreign occupying force on our internationally recognized territory. The best CBM would be to withdraw the occupation force, and we can talk to each other. If need be, Azerbaijan is not going to send troops there. We're talking about peacekeepings, of course. For 20 years, well, 18 years, the ceasefire held without any peacekeepers. It doesn't hold perfectly. There are shootouts and fire. People fire at each other. But there is no war. Can you imagine that? That speaks for responsibility of Azerbaijan. And I hope in many ways for responsibility of our Armenian neighbors. We do not fight the war only because there are no peacekeepers. That by itself is the best confidence-building measure. So the withdrawal is the best solution, not withdrawal of specific armed forces, not withdrawal of guys in the green uniforms or red uniforms or with white berets or green berets, but the specific withdrawal of all armed forces from the occupied territory. That's stipulated in all international documents. It's obvious. That's one. The second one is, you mentioned preparation of war, not peace. Again, for 20 years, Azerbaijan has been engaged in negotiations, not in war. But the status quo is not sustainable. Status quo is anybody who thinks that a government can tolerate, a nation can tolerate 1/5 of its territory occupied and 1 million refugees, that's just not reasonable. Nobody can tolerate that. we did not initiate that attack. We do not want something which is unreasonable. That is as simple as that. Now, when we go back to the, again, our colleague from the Armenian embassy raised a very strange statement about the visa issue. Today, we issued a visa to an American with an Armenian last name. What are you talking about? I get requests and issue visas on a daily basis to Armenians. Well, they don't know what they're talking about. I understand that you like to use that example, but this is wrong. I just did it today. I'm just telling you, as an ambassador, I'm saying today I personally issued a visa to an American Armenian. What kind of propaganda is this? And please ask your friends at the State Department to change this, because they're wrong. Yes, and you're using it. That's actually not true. I mean, I'm not, State Department wrote a letter about Armenia smuggling arms to Iran. I didn't use it here because maybe it's propaganda, maybe it's true, I don't know. Up to you. You could talk to them. But that is simply not true. That's an important issue. Because, again, that's almost offensive to me because my consul sits here. He just signed up on a piece of paper which you said cannot be, is impossible. So, I mean, that's simply is wrong. The other question is, of course, the most important, we go back to a serious issue to our south, which Mr. Cohen asked me. It's a big issue. Why is Iran so concerned about Azerbaijan? We try to answer that question as well for ourselves. What's at the root of this? At the end of the day, we both share very similar cultures. People have a lot in common. They're relatives on both sides of the Araz River. We both have, Azerbaijan has ruled Iran for centuries. Iranian Shah sovereignty at some point extended over Azerbaijan. So what is it? Why otherwise such a naturally friendly two countries cannot find this modus operandi? And we try. To be honest, we try. We try to talk to our neighbors. We try to reason with our neighbors. I think the fundamental issue is that if the issue of Iranian identity, the search for what Iran is today, and Azerbaijan, by being a secular, predominantly Shia nation, which has very close cultural links to Iran, and yet chooses to live on its own, be a friend of the United States and Israel, and by the way, that is a very significant part of the problem in Iran, that we are friends of both Israel and the United States, serves as a serious irritant to the government in Tehran. They can't fully digest the existing of independent Azerbaijan. Not only independent, but also independently minded Azerbaijan. How to deal with this situation, I don't know. We have for years tried to build an understanding with our Iranian neighbors that we do not interfere in their domestic affairs, and they do not try to do that in Azerbaijan. Unfortunately, there are some cases of very obvious support for radical groups and religious radicalism within Azerbaijan coming from our Iranian neighbors. Of course, the situation is very fluid. We don't know what's going to happen in Iran. We don't know what's going to happen with Iran in the region. But that is one indication of a bigger issue. Now, in many ways, the Iranian efforts in Azerbaijan recently are almost in the reaction to pressure on Tehran. They're lashing out at someone they see as a U.S. ally. So we cannot we cannot disregard this either. I mean, they just think they repeatedly said that we will attack you if we get attacked by the West. I'm not sure what the logic behind that is, but I mean, that's what it is. Now, on the last point, Mr. Cohen pointed out, if I were a reasonably thinking Iranian, the last thing I would ever mention or wish is the revision of Turkmenchai treaty. That treaty, if it is ever revised, is not going to be as good for Iranians as it is today. So I would just keep it the way it is for their own sake, not for ours.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you very, very much for some very stimulating comments.